Shanghai, or good morning, to those of you like me who don't speak Mandarin. As the introduction said, I want to talk to you about Merlin's experience and my experience of working in this very unique market. And just listening to the previous discussion on sustainability, this market, interestingly, isn't always associated with being eco-friendly and looking for sustainability. And yet, in terms of its travel patterns, it can fulfill a lot of your off-peak periods. So as operators, it's a market we should be considering not just because there's potential from a revenue perspective, but absolutely this could start to help us in some of those other ancillary areas that we may not have thought about. So why China matters so much? There are 1.3 billion people, so there's a mass of people for us to talk to engage with, and to attract to our locations and our attractions. We're seeing rising incomes, and with it a rising middle class and an increase in travelers and tourists. It has the #1 tourism spend globally. We're seeing it becoming the largest outbound provider in terms of visitors, with over 100 million overseas journeys being made. And that growth in tourism has been around 10% year on year. So as a market, the potential is absolutely huge. But it's exciting because it's still very nascent, and so the potential is there for us to really grasp the nettle here and do something particularly dynamic with it. And talking of that word dynamic, if we look at the media landscape for China, we would definitely term it in 3 ways: big, complex, and dynamic. And why do I say that? Well, you know, we're a great operator of tourist attractions with lots of experience in the global landscape. But going into this market, we couldn't just take a cookie-cutter approach of what we'd done in other locations, because China has its own Facebook, it has its own Twitter, it has its own Google search, and of the latter years has become a cashless society. So in the way that their consumers want to behave and spend and consume products and consume destinations is very, very different. And therefore, the way in which we communicate with this market, the way in which we engage with this market, and the way in which we showcase our products to this market has to be really considered. What was our starting position? So Merlin Entertainments has been very successful, as I've said, in a number of markets. And naively, I'll be honest with you, we thought we could take the approach that we'd made in many, many markets, Germany, France, Austria, take that approach and apply it to this exciting new destination. And we knew that it was a complicated market. We knew it was going to be difficult for us to engage with partners there. So we took our usual approach of working through a tourism board, undertaking sales missions, engaging partners, talking to wholesalers, tour operators. And we termed this a pull mechanic of selling. And we were relatively successful. But for the scale of this market, relatively successful would not be sufficient. We introduced a number of attractions into key locations in China, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Wuhan, in Hong Kong. And by doing so, it allowed us to understand the Chinese consumer much more. We were able to bust some of the myths around that consumer too. In advance of working in market, the understanding we had as a Western company was Chinese visitors come in en masse in big groups. They don't enter visitor attractions. They'll just stand outside and take a photograph. They love shopping, but they don't really like much else, and they only eat Chinese food. Yeah? I'm sure there's a few of you in the audience thinking, yeah, that was my approach to this market too. But actually working in market, we found that these consumers, particularly the millennials and the Gen Z and beyond, are just as dynamic as any other market, do want to get engaged in experiences, are looking for authenticity, do want to have an interaction. So that myth busting really helped us in our approach to it. And we engaged staff in China, in location, to help us push sales by working much more in language and working more in a more synergistic way with more of our suppliers. And what all of those suppliers told us was, and I can acknowledge this as there's a clock ticking down on the front here, is that we had to work under a phenomenon, which was China time. Every client we met with said, you need to operate in China time. And I was obviously quite intrigued to see what this was. And basically, in China, it's a 9-hour clock, not a 24-hour clock. You have to do everything much quicker because if you don't, technology will have moved on and you will have missed the opportunity to engage in a certain way. So as operators, if we're thinking about entering this market, you have to enter it with a solid strategic plan and work out how you're going to invest beforehand. Now, that's not to say do nothing. You know, there's still an amount of business to be had by starting the journey, but really have a strategic objective and a goal of how you're going to do that. So making Merlin China ready, we had to engage in a number of areas. We had to make sure we had language facilities, whether that's Mandarin-speaking staff, signage at our attractions, whether that was ensuring that we could accept the right payment types like WeChat Pay, Alipay, Union Pay International, whether we could offer a digital guest journey, because again, this is how this market wants to consume, and ensuring that we engage in the right ecosystems like WeChat, where we've developed WeChat mini programs that basically form the facility of a guide through the mobile phone in the pocket, because this audience do not engage in the same way with apps that a lot of our Western audience do. They want to engage in a complete ecosystem. So the ancillary market, we like to call it in Merlin the dark arts, because you go out, you meet a lot of people, you engage, you definitely socialize a lot, and somehow business comes to you through those activities. But we had to learn a new art, and that was the art of the workaround, because we didn't have pots of money to go and say, we'll change everything, we'll invest in all of these new systems, we'll develop new APIs and connectivity. So we had to work out how to deal with 3 really key problem areas. And that was getting the engagement and the commitment of our attractions, wherever they be in the world, whether that was Sydney or London, really ensuring that the attractions themselves were engaged. And that was very slow. So our speed to launch and activate just wasn't quick enough in this market for us to really get the best out of it. And then when we finally did start to operate and put some of these processes in place, we were finding, again, that we were attracting the Chinese consumer in our peak periods. And therefore, we were offering a product that very often wasn't available. So in engaging with the Chinese audience and understanding their visitor profile and their patterns of visitation, working around how we could build product much more authentic, much more exciting, and much more engaging, selling it through the right ecosystems during the holidays like Chinese New Year, which in February, as we know, is an off-peak period, or engaging with them in their golden weeks in the October periods, again in our off-peak periods. By developing product, we could drive this market better and facilitate our needs. And we've had some big wins. You know, we have had much more engagement in the last 2 years. We've grown our business by 3 times in the last 3 years. 3 times, 3 times, 3 times. And that, when you apply it to the scale of this market, is worth engaging in at that level. But we haven't always got it right. We've had all this experience, we've worked in market, we've got this knowledge that we have to work in language and we have to engage with the audience on their ecosystems, and we have to ensure that we talk to them correctly. And yet, at the same time, we launch a brand new attraction, Legoland in Japan, and we did none of those things, despite the fact that for Japan, China is their #1 outbound destination. So inbound country. So what we had to do then is find a workaround. We had to engage with one of our OTA partners, and we worked with Klook in this instance, who were real specialists in that Greater China market. We engaged with Klook in our partnership to attract more people from the Hong Kong and Taiwan regions, because we knew we weren't the specialists here, they were. So I would say, when you are facing this market, really understand how you want to distribute and through whom as well. Because there's a huge amount of energy and effort that will be required at your attraction level, at your operation level, and it's such a scalable market that unless you really engage other people and other specialists, you will only ever throw a pebble into a huge lake. So it's about understanding the whole distribution patterns. So the future for Merlin is really about more and more and more. We want to do more with this market. We understand it more. We want to spend more time in location working with partners. We want to engage the partners that we have in a much more in a deeper and more synergistic way. We want to develop our API connectivity, whether that's directly with our attractions through our Accessor platform, or whether that's through aggregators who are specialists in each of these markets. But the important thing for us is to ensure that we continue to offer these customers a seamless digital journey, because that's exactly how they like to consume. Thank you very much.